Hi guys, let's take a look at drawing in 3D a little bit in the coordinate planes. This is isometric paper. It's very useful for that, so you can find a copy of this online, I'm sure. So just choose an origin. I'll just draw a line this way, for example, and then here and then here. So we're gonna call this here our x-axis. I'll label that in a minute. Then we'll call this our y-axis here. And let's also add our z-axis. So the z-axis, how do you draw that? It's gonna go straight up here. So basically like this. This is going to be our z-axis. So now let's label things. So this one here I'm going to call X. This one here I'm going to call Y. And then this one up here I'll call Z. Now we want to put marks along the axes. So you want to do this in a very specific way. When you do these along the X, you want to make sure they're parallel to the Y-axis. So you see how this little mark is parallel to the Y-axis? You want the correct view. So it's supposed to be like this, you see? Okay, now when you mark these little marks or hash marks along the y-axis, you want to make them parallel to the x-axis, so like this. 1, 2, 3. You see how they're parallel to the x-axis as shown? Okay, what about on this axis here? Some people draw them straight, but I think they should be parallel to the x-axis also and parallel to the marks on the y-axis like this, you see? Like this. Now let's do the next part, which is let's draw in some grids on each of the coordinate planes. So how do you do that? Depending on it should be like this, you see? This is a grid like this. So I'm just gonna go maybe like out to here. Like this, like this, like this, like this, and then like this. Okay. Let's do a few because then we want to practice. Oops. So now that didn't work quite well. Okay, so let me just cancel that operation there. So I'm going to practice marking points within the coordinate planes because that's part of it. So it looks like this. Okay, so let's just get rid of the excess stuff here that we don't need. Okay, so we don't need here this, right? And we don't need these little marks where I overshot a little bit. Okay, like that. Okay, so that's this so far. Okay, let's go on now. So let's do... Okay, so let me enable this back. Okay, so maybe I'll go out to about here. So again, you see how these lines are being drawn? They're being drawn to parallel to the y-axis. And then you draw these lines, and you want to make sure these are parallel to the z-axis. Like that and like this. Fix up the gaps a little bit. Get rid of any messy stuff at the very ends there, but that gets the idea across. Okay, now let's finish up in the plane here. So again, I'm going to draw out to here and then like this. Okay, and then you draw these lines. When you draw these lines, again, you want to make sure they're parallel to the x-axis this time. So draw them parallel to the x-axis. Like this, like this, like this. And then continue so to the x-axis. Okay, but you get the idea, I think, by now. So I've zoomed in here and we're at the origin. So this is the origin point. What are the coordinates there? So here you have 0 for x, 0 for y, and 0 for z. Mark some other points. So for example, like this point. Now first of all, where is that point located generally speaking? Well, look at it. Over here we have the x-axis. Here this is z. So this entire object, that grid, that would be the xz plane. Now an xz plane, regardless of the point, we know that y has the value 0. Whatever that point is, its y coordinate is 0. So we can label it more precisely. So what we do is we count. This is 1 and 2. So this is 2 along the x-axis. And then I turn and go up. So this is now 2 along the z-axis. So this is x equals 2. And this is z equals 2. So you mark that point. Careful with the coordinates. So it's 2 here, y is 0, and then z is again positive 2. So x, y, and then z. Let's go on to some other point now. Let's focus now on the yz plane. So within this plane, x is equal to 0. Let's mark some random point within there. So let's just choose to say a random point like right here. So what are the coordinates of that point? Let's count. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and then 3 this way. So this means y has the value positive 3, because I just went 3 along the y-axis. And I turn and go 1, 2, 3, 4. So this tells us that z has the value 4. So the coordinates of this point, let me zoom in here, put them in correctly. So x is equal to 0. Y we just saw, I believe, was equal to what value? 3. And the z is 4. So 0, 3, and 4. So that's what that looks like thus far. Now let's finish up. Here's just a random point in the bottom somewhere over here. So let's say this point right here. Now for this one, remember this is now the xy plane. So within this plane, let's do a point. Okay. So I don't want to get confused with that line. So let me just switch colors. So again, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this time x equals 5 to the green point, and I turn and I go 1 this way. So this says y equals 1. And then within this plane generally, for any point, z is equal to 0. So I should notice on the side z equals 0, right, for any point within this plane. So the coordinates of this point then are the following, to zoom in a little bit more. So x is 5, y is 1, and z is 0. So 5, 1, 0. So that's how you can do this pretty well. Get some isometric paper, draw grids like this, and then you can pin everything down. I'll see you in another video. Leave a like if it's helpful.